Okay, what?
Like everything they do at this house, you can't touch everything at Grandma's house.
Okay.
Okay, then what?
Then you're not listening to me.
Then you're not listening to me.
I asked you not to do something.
Linda, but listen to me. Look at, if we do something, if you get that birthday off, you're gonna break it.
Okay, but I'm letting you know that you cannot. No,
Linda, lick it.
You're not listening to me.
Linda,
Listen to me now. Listen to me now.
Listen to me.
No, you're not listening. I said no cupcakes, and you try to get cupcakes, and you try to ask Grandma.
Linda,
Didn't you?
Linda, lick it. If we do something right out this, if we get chlorine, you can't even get them. You're gonna burn your butt.
What's gonna burn your butt? You and Kevin don't listen, so I have to give both of you guys pop-pows in your butt.
But Linda, Grandpa's gonna give you peppers in your butt.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
I have to. You don't want me to hit Kevin, or you don't want me to spank you?
No.
Why?
Because anybody wants to spank me.
Then I have to spank Kevin.
But he's my little pop-box.
He's your little pop-ups, but he doesn't listen.
But Linda, honey, look at this. Right now, we can't do anything if we can't get everything out of the wall. If we're gonna break everything down.
I'm not breaking anything down. I'm just letting you know you cannot have cupcakes for dinner.
Linda, like this thing, I never belong to you. Anything, you can't get anything and anything. I'm
done arguing with you.
I'm not arguing with you.
You need to listen to the things that I say because I'm the mom and I'm the adult.
Listen to me. All the time they get them this thing.
I'm done arguing with you.
Linda, I'm done arguing with you.
That's why I showed it to you guys. Are you listening to me? Listen, Linda. We have this little joke in class. Every time I say listen to my students, they're like, listen, Linda, because of course they've seen the video. To listen is to give one's attention to a sound, to take notice of and act on what someone says. That's the definition of listen. And of course, as a teacher, one of the things I value the most, well, no, I'm not going to say value. One of the things I love is for my students to listen to me, right? I don't know about you guys, but I love to be listened to. And there's a problem with that because, of course, to be listened to, you have to talk a lot. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. Is there a doubt in your mind that God listens to you? Do you have any doubt that God's listening to you? James spoke about doubt a few weeks ago. And then Doug shared the Prayer 101. I really connected with the analogy of the grandparent. I thought that was amazingly well illustrated. I think we don't have any questions about God listening to us. Well, at least not now for me as an adult. I'm there. Like, I'll talk to God because I believe that He's listening. So, really, what I wanted to share with regards to prayer, because this whole month we're talking about prayer, is that prayer is awesome, isn't it? I mean, no appointments, no cell phone bills, no internet connection. We don't have to worry about Wi-Fi. That's awesome. I think that's pretty cool. And as we focus on prayer, one of the things I think we can all agree on is the fact that, prayer is very different for all of us, isn't it? Because we're all individuals. I mean, what prayer is for me isn't exactly the same thing it is for you. And with that, because prayer is a personal experience, then I guess I'm done with my sermon today. Right? What else is there? If, in fact, prayer is personal, right? I have nothing more to say. I think the only thing I can say, really, is the fact that I have a personal journey. And if you don't mind me sharing it with you, I'd love to, because of course, I love to be listened to. So if you get, I want to share that with you. And since you're still sitting, then I guess I can begin, right? So it all started for me when I, at one point in my childhood, realized that God existed. My mother had a very limited education, but in that limited education, she had faith, which was quite fascinating for me because my mother grew up an orphan. And so, right when I think about it, my mind is blown, because in that simple faith that she shared, we come from the Catholic faith, as many people, who are part of the Adventist Church. But I remember that she would sing these, songs that talked about, God and people and, saints and stuff like that. Really, like I can still sing some of those, 40 plus years after. And I remember that, and I remember that she would have us repeat the guardian angel prayer. I don't know if many of you guys might be familiar with it. I don't remember it all right now, but I do remember that we prayed, even though we weren't Adventists, and even though she didn't grow up with a family who gave her, a spiritual upbringing. But I remember that I said, in my mind at some point, that I believed that God existed. And then when I turned 6, I remember we became Seventh-day Adventists. And that's another interesting story. But because we're talking about prayer, I want you to know that when I became, when I came into the church, I was 6 years old, and I remember being in primaries, and I commend all of the, Sabbath school teachers for their work. I know Doug and Claudia do an amazing job there, passing on biblical truth to our children. The teacher that I remember, the only teacher I remember, was my primary teacher. That's when I first came into to the church. And I remember her teaching us Psalms 23. And I remember it as a prayer. To me, it's like if it were a prayer. I know it's poetry, but I remember it, I remember it as a prayer. So, when I learned that, I began to repeat it, and I began to repeat it, and I began to hold on to it. So I had this idea that God existed and that he heard me. That there was this consciousness inside of me that understood that. But then I came into my early teenage years, and a lot of tragic things happened in my life, and that's a different story. But I began to call on God, and I did not hear him come through. He wasn't answering any of my prayers. And so I began to disconnect from him. I began to not believe that he heard me, because I kept asking for something and he didn't come through with it. He eventually would, but that's for another time that I share with you. So I began this swaying back and forth. Really, I think that if I would have had somebody influence me in the wrong way, I would have become an atheist at that point in my life. I would have, because I wasn't convinced that God was listening to me. But God's amazing grace is beyond my understanding. So, when I get to college, I married about a year and a half. I had 3 semesters to go before I finished college. I got married with my first husband. For those of you who don't know, I widowed early on. in our marriage, my first husband, which is Sharon and Dana's father, he had cancer, and so we lost him to cancer. But when I was in college, we married. Well, of course, as many newlywed couples, we had nothing. And but I was going to college, and I kept, doing my thing. And because, I've always known that I needed to get ahead in life, and I needed to do what I needed to, I just needed to cross all my T's and dot all my I's, and I knew I had to get things done. So I was going to college. In this time, I was asked to MC a regional choir festival. Being the extrovert that I am, and being that I just love to be in front of people, and I just, that's my thing, I said yes, of course. Didn't even think about it. Well, when I went home to think about it, I realized that I had absolutely nothing to wear. And I really didn't have anything to wear. I was, we were like below the poverty line. We're going to school, just trying to make ends meet, and just newlyweds and everything. So I had no money to go and get myself a dress, much less a nice dress. So I'm like, what do I have to lose, right? What do I have to lose? So I'm like, okay, God, I know we haven't talked for a while, but I'm still going to church. I'm still doing the motions. I'm still, giving my tithe, even though I can barely pay for, for what I eat. But I'm gonna trust that you're listening. I need a dress. I need a dress for this thing I am going to, right? So it was a church event. So I figured, I was safe asking for it, because it was a God thing that I had to do. So I asked for it, period, and I didn't give it much more thought, and that was it. I knew the time was coming where I had to, be part of this program. So it happened to be that I was in class with a woman who had already, raised her kids and everything, and she'd just come back to school, and she was, upper middle class, and we always, talk, we had our little conversations and everything. Her name's Maria. I still run into her every once in a while, and I always greet her with such delight. Because one day when we were talking, she's like, I have a question for you. And I'm like, sure. She says, what size are you? I love this story, because this was after my prayer. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what size I was back then, but I was bigger than I am now. Thank God for the health message. Okay, so, amen. But she says, you know what? I have this brand new dress, and it didn't fit me, but I think it'll fit you. Would you mind if I give it to you? Like, she was like embarrassed, right? And I'm like, would I mind? I just prayed for a dress. Yes, that's like, I do not mind. Believe me, I do not mind. Give me the dress, right? So she brings the dress. Turns out to be this beautiful, long, flowing floral. It fit me to a T, like Theresa. It fit me perfectly. It was exactly what God had intended. I looked great in it. I loved it. And I wore that dress for years. It was such a good, it was a name brand. I'm not big on name brands, but I know it was an expensive dress that she gave me. So like, God and I were on talking terms now again. I'm like, you came through, and every time I tell Victor, I can't believe it. He says, why not? He's always listening to you. Why can't you believe it, right? But it's just my expression of awe, and so God came through for me on that day. I was a young 20-some-year-old. I think I was like 24. I love that dress. I think I got rid of it because it was just like too worn out. It was an amazing blessing that I received. So God and I were on speaking terms now again, and so we started talking to each other, and I started asking him for things. Things that, I could go on and on and on and saying, I asked him, what, God, I didn't prepare anything for Sabbath. Can somebody invite me to church? And guess what? I get invited to church. And so like stuff like that was amazing, right? And I was feeling pretty good about this relationship that God and I, had, quote unquote. Anyway, so God was listening and all was going well. Some years passed. And then I asked him a really big question. I said, I want you to restore my husband's health. He's really sick. He's got 3 brain tumors. But you can do it, right? You can make him better. Well, the answer was no. After his death, I quickly decided that God was in it for the small things, but not for the big things. I mean, that was my mentality. 2 months after that, Sharon was in the hospital, critical condition, very, very, very ill. And I just told God, if you're not going to come through with this one, then I'm done with you. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm done. Like, really? This is it. No more chances. Because you already failed on that one. And I told him straight out, some of my friends are like, you are so disrespectful to God. And I'm like, you know what? My God's bigger than my rants are probably like nothing to him. Like this going on and on and on. I think God's like, I see God, just kind of like, Linda. So this is what I said to God. I said, you know what? If you take this child, you better take me too, because I'm done with you. That's it. I'm done. I have no more. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to fight with anybody. Do you guys know the answer to that prayer? Because she's still walking around, actually jumping up and down. Right? He answered that one. So he and I started on talking terms again. Sharon's around. Praise God, she's 19 now. That's been 18 years ago. In December, it'll be 18 years since God and I had that last throwdown. Is that how you say it? You go, no. That works? Okay. All right. I was thinking about that, when you go to the wrestling matches. What do you call that? Yeah? Wrestling match. There you go. So, I realized at that point that even though God wasn't audible every time I talked to him, didn't mean that he wasn't listening. So, after we lost Luis and Sharon recuperated, I started this new relationship with God. It took me a while. It wasn't, and then he brings Victor into my life, and Victor was a man of prayer. That was a problem for me. Because I wasn't really he believed everything God, everything. And I was like, and I thank God for that, because it's been an inspiration and it's been a support for the shaky, relationship that I had with God. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to start this, and so I earnestly began talking to God. I earnestly began looking for him in everything. And we, began our family and, and we're busy with all that. And I'm talking to God and he's responding. And things, things are going pretty good. So fast forward to a couple of years, and then I have Dana, which is our eldest. When she was a teenager, she's all like, Mom, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, sure. Of course, I'm a teacher. You can ask me whatever you want, right? Whatever I don't know. There's a saying in Spanish that whatever you don't know, you invent, right? You figure it, you improv. So anyway, so I'm like, yeah, sweetheart, go ahead, ask. And she's all like, Mom, you say that God talks to you? Because I would say stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, God told me this, and and he still does. Yes, he does. And she's like, Mom, you say God talks to you. This was her question. Let me read it. She's all like, well, how does he talk to you? This is a teenager earnestly asking their spiritual, model, because that's what we are for our children. How does God actually talk to you, Mom? Like, really? And when she said that, this is what came to mind. I said, you know what? Well, in his word, what he says in his word, what he talks to me, he'll say stuff to me through other people. When I ask for something and it happens, that's him talking to me, And so I really thought that I had given her a really good answer. And she left. I don't know if it was completely satisfied. And that's why I'm talking about this right now, because I don't know if I really satisfied my child's desire to know how I and God spoke to each other. So, but I felt really good about myself. I said, hey, this is theologically firm. That was a good answer that I gave her. So I was, I was pretty happy. But then maturity comes, You begin to mature as an individual. And now, Dana, I know I asked her to see this live stream because, she wouldn't be able to make it with us here. But Dana, this is what I should have answered back then, but I didn't, because I didn't really have a relationship with God. This is what I want to say. I want to say, I hear God's voice. He actually talks to me. He calls me by my name. And then he tells me how much he loves me. I want to hear from him, from his voice, how proud he is of me. Even if it has to be the way Job heard it, in the thunder, Job 31. If you guys please will open up to Job 38:1. And how Job is ranting, like I have done many times, just ranting and saying, look, I do everything I'm supposed to do. I've behaved. I've done everything you asked me to do. There's nothing that you haven't asked me to do that I've done. And he goes on and on and on. And then we come to Job 38:1. Can somebody please read that?
Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. And I can imagine that thundering voice. And he tells them, you know what? I can just imagine him. I mean, this is how what he would say like nowadays. It's like, dude, you want to listen? You want to hear what I have to say? Okay. Put on your pants, because you're going to need them. And this is him talking. I don't care if he has to say that to me, because I'm like ready for that. Because then it would be me in chapter 40. Can you guys turn to chapter 40 with me? Verse 3 and 5. 3 through 5. This would be me. I'm guessing this would be all of us. Can somebody read that, please?
Job answered, I can see how small I am, Lord, and that I do not know as much as I thought I did. What else can I say? I will put my hand over my mouth and keep silent. I spoke up once, but did not have the right answer. I spoke up twice, but I will not do so again. Then the Lord spoke out of the storm, saying,
That's right. Thank you. So this is me. Because now I understand that I have nothing to say to God. All that ranting, all that. It's taken 46 years to realize that I've been doing all the talking. That I don't let God talk. I don't let him talk. And you know why I don't let them talk? Because I'm just not ready to listen. I'm not. Linda, listen. Nobody Linda here, right? Do we have any Lindas? Huh? Oh, yes, she's very Linda. Yes, she is. Linda is beautiful in Spanish. So, Epictetus, I hope I'm pronouncing that's Greek, so, said this. He was a Stoic philosopher. He says, we were given, anybody? 2 years. 2 years. And what is the rest? Just imagine what it says, right? To listen twice as much as we speak. You know, I have this quote in one of my classrooms but you know, now I realize that it should be for me more than for my students. You know, I have it there for my students, but I think it should be more there for me. All of us. And then, this is from Ernest Hemingway, and I think this is something that I want to hold on to because it says, I like to listen. I have learned a great deal from listening carefully. Most people never listen. Wow. So, why is it so hard to listen? Why is it so hard to listen? Anybody? Why is it so hard to listen?
Because you might not like what you hear.
Because you might, you might not like what you hear. Anybody else? There's a lot of psychological reasons why we don't listen. Yes, Ivan? Yes, because we love to speak.
Speaking feeds our ego and pride.
Yes.
We don't like to get out of our own little world.
Oh, yeah. Because listening puts us out of our comfort zone. You're so on it, Miguel. Yes. Oh. Here we go. All right. So, it's very hard to listen. And you know, I don't know about you, but my brain is always going. My mouth might be shut, but my inner voice is constantly going and going and going and going. I have this little ritual at night so I can actually fall asleep. I don't know about you, but I have to go through because my brain is like, I always have something to think about, something to do, some idea, something I have to write down. For those of you who put your head on the pillow and go to bed, I am totally envious. Here we go. So, the Bible is full of wisdom when it comes to listening. And please join me. I need somebody to read James 1:19. I need somebody else to read, and raise your hand if you want James 1:19, so we don't have anybody else read it. Okay, James 1:19. Luke 11:28. Luke 11:28, thank you, right here. Jeremiah 29:12. Jeremiah 29:12, yes. And Proverbs 16:20. Yes, Manuel over there. Okay. You can read Proverbs 19:27 at the end, okay? When we're coming to a close very soon here. Okay, please, James 1:19.
My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry.
Oh. Quick to listen. What does Luke say? Luke 11.
Blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it.
Jeremiah 29:12.
Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you.
Isn't that wonderful? Proverbs 16:20.
Whoever pays attention and learns will prosper, and eventually God will be happy.
Wow. Listening. And there's really positive things that go along with that. Promises of good things when we listen. So who's really listening? In this day and age when we are so distracted by everything, who's really listening? You know, Stephen Covey, I believe that's the pronunciation, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says, when you listen with intent to understand, not the intent to reply. Is right. I'm glad you did that, brother, because you know what? You and I, we're on the same page here. Like normally, when I talk to people, it's not to listen to them. This talk is for me. I'm just sharing it with you. It's not, I'm not trying to teach you anything, but this is me. This is what God, I start off asking God, what do you want me to say? And he's like, no. It's like, what I want you to learn, Theresa, because this is what he wants me to learn. This is what he wants me to learn, And this is all you guys are helping me by reading these texts so I can have God's word. And thank you for being part of this. So, not to reply. Have you ever just sat there to listen to God's voice? If you have, I know you're blessed. I know you're blessed. But if you haven't, and you're in that process like me, or you want to try it, I invite you to follow me with these next couple of things that I'm going to share with you. Could you read Psalms 46:10 for us, please? I know I had said Proverbs, but if you can read Psalms 46:10, and let's see what God has to say there.
Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth.
This comes to my mind consistently when I am trying to be in prayer, when I'm trying to listen to God's voice. And it says what? Be still. You know how hard for a hyperactive person that is? Because I'm getting older, but I'm still like, my body actually can sit down and relax, but my brain's still like, I remember Mark Laurie, he's a Christian comedian. Like we heard him once with the NAD. I don't remember if you were there, Michael. And he's all like, I'm ADHD, but my body's there, but my brain's all over the room. And I'm like, I totally get that. That's me. It's so hard to be still. And I don't think God's only talking about your body actually being still, but your brain being still. So I have a couple of things that I want to share with you that I'm doing, and hopefully, if there's anything here you can pick up from that, well, then that'd be awesome. I mean, I'll be happy for you because this is something I'm doing and I'm happy for myself, I have a problem with sitting down for long periods of time. As many of you here on Sabbath will know, sitting down does what to you? Yeah, it's like many of us have our pre-Sabbath nap here, during church, right? Because we're not used to sitting down. We're just not used to sitting down without doing anything. And, I just had this little nice conversation with one of my children about how it's just not fun to come to church and sit down. It isn't. I'm having fun because I'm up here talking to you guys, right? But you guys have to sit there and listen to what I have to say. And I understand that it's not always very, exciting. For me, I sit down, my kids say, Mom, come watch a movie. Like, I'm like dozing off, or thinking, I have 20,000 things to do, and here I am, sitting down, watching this, My brain does not let me be still. So, what I'm going to share with you is what I've been doing. So, the most important thing to do is never be afraid to ask for help. If you need help, ask for help. I've had to ask for help because, my hyperness, my anxiety, and everything I carry with me, it rubs up on my family, and they're like, we're not as hyper as you are. You know that, right? Like, have you figured that out? So ask for help. Okay, and that can come in many shapes or forms, with God, with professionals, whatever you need. But if you want to listen to God's voice, and you struggle like me, and you have no idea, here's some suggestions for you. First, practice sitting. Yeah, that's a rough one for me. Practice sitting, right? But not in front of the TV. An ideal is 30 to 45 minutes. That's like ideal, but at a minimum, 15 to 20 minutes. You need to make this a routine. It needs to be at a specific time of day, a place. Like make sure it's like, if it's your cushions, if it's your chairs, make sure it's that same place so you can make it a routine. It's not easy. I've been trying. It's coming along. That's all I can tell you, but it's not easy. Some days I don't get to sit down because like I already have, like my list is calling me. And so I start on that list, but I come back, I relapse, but then I like, okay, no, I need to do this again. So I go back. What's really important, we've seen the War Room movie. And you know how this woman has this space that she created? That's vital. And I had no idea, it's not only a spiritual thing, because a lot of people think, is, just in the spirit. No. I mean, when you study, I think about all the techniques that they teach us, how to help our students study. One of the techniques is that you create a routine of the same place, same time, and make sure that that place is ready for you to sit down and study. So this is beneficial, in all aspects of your life. So create that space. But when you're sitting down, when you go sit down, make sure you know your intention. Don't just go sit for nothing. Like, why are you sitting down? Why do you want to sit there? For me, this is what I'm sharing with you. I want to hear God's voice. I want to listen to him. But that's so hard for me because my brain is constantly talking. It's very hard for me to not be thinking about everything I have to do. And so I go back and I sit down and I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And then I think of something. So I have to go back. Okay, Lord, here I am. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. It's not easy. Today, all I could do was 10 minutes. Why? Because I had to get back and I had to check all my sermon notes. So it's like, but I sat there for 10 minutes. I forced myself to sit there. And then I kept telling my brain to listen to what God had to say. So it's a journey, there's no switch, there's no magic pill. It's a constant practice. So sit every day. Try not to miss more than one day a week. And once a week, try to increase the time you sit. Now, don't become obsessed with sitting, okay? Don't become obsessed with it. If there's life happening, get to life. If there's something, if your obligations or, work, you need to get to that. Then I don't want you to say, oh, that lady at the church said that I had to sit and, it's time to go to work. No, you find a time that's appropriate for you. And this is key. But before I say that, I want to tell you guys, this is what I'm sharing with you. I'm picking up from some of the materials from Stanford University. They have a compassion center for research studies called CCARE. And a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing with you comes from that because somebody who's a professional shared that with me. And so I've been using it, and this is why I want to share it with you. But this, if you don't remember anything else, this is what you need to remember. That was my cue that I need to finish with. Okay. Sit even when you are upset. Let me remind you of that. Sit even when you are upset. It is crucial when difficulties arrive. And now that I see it, and I look back at my experience with God, and I'm like, every time difficulties arise, I got upset with him. So I wouldn't sit with him. I wouldn't want to listen to what he had to say. And all I can say is this now. To this point in my life, God had my back. He knew exactly what I was going through, but he knew exactly where he wanted me to be. Of course, I didn't know that. And as a child who normally doesn't know that, I wanted things my way. But I praise him for his way. because it is always the best way. So even if you are upset with him, sit and listen. Would you please read Proverbs 19:27, and we will close with this text.
Stop listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge.
May our children and ourselves never stop listening to instruction, so that we will always walk in his light. God bless you all.